Hi there. I'm Ted Kuzer, and this is another in the John Ames reading series at the Heritage Room. This has been going on now for a couple of years, and we're particularly privileged tonight to have Bill Kloefkorn come to read to us. I was thinking on the way over here that 16 years ago, right about this time of year, Bill Kloefkorn came to my house, and he had this little stationery box with him with a lot of little scraps of paper in it, and he brought it in the house, and he said that he'd been writing some poems, and he kind of wondered if maybe I'd take a look at them. He wondered if maybe he shouldn't try to send them out, and I said, sure, just leave those with me, and I'll take a look at them. And so that evening I looked at them, and I thought, now this, here is a really well-kept secret. This guy is really good, These were really wonderful poems, and I was just delighted. But being the competitive male that I am, I thought of telling him when he came back, Bill, I don't know, really, you probably ought to put these away for a few years, But within a couple of years after that, he was publishing his first books, and you all, I'm sure, are aware of how well he's done over the years. So I'd like to welcome you to this reading and welcome up my old friend, Bill Kloefkorn.
Well, thank you, Ted. I continue to appreciate the help that you gave me with those poems, and the first poem that I ever had published was a postcard poem that Ted Kuzer published in the postcard series of the Salt Creek Reader, and it was called After 10 Winters. And it goes like this. I stand alone at the foot of my grandfather's grave, trembling to tell. The door to the granary is open, sir, and someone lost the bucket to the well. So if you don't like that poem, it's Ted's fault. He published it this winter. This poem is called On the Platte at Camp Augustine. Early evening, and the young people are wading the river, becoming bold in its clear, shallow currents, their laughter hanging distinct and immobile in the damp, windless air. They will not be surprised when later the storm blows so swiftly over, when the stars appear, when the night settles over their luminous bodies like a weightless comforter. They are in love with the inevitability of joy. When they sleep the insolent sleep of the stone. O Lord, how the power of their absence of guile might buy and sell this world. In their own sweet, partial way, they are immortal. Here just south of Brewster. Here just south of Brewster, the North Loop River meanders with a clean and silent insolence, as if it knows something we don't know and likely never will. But just between you and me and the gatepost, honey, I think it is trying to speak to us of pace, and of the crooked line that, seen from the proper distance, travels somewhere after all, and of the larger body beyond the smaller water where, just beyond the bend, beyond that other distant bend, we come together. Those two poems are from a brand new issue of Nancy Peters' little magazine called Whole Notes, and the poem after that is one by Ted Kuzer, and there's one that concludes this issue called September Getting Married Again by Hilda Raz. And that's the end of that commercial. Those two poems are about water, about the river. And what I want to do tonight is read some rock and water poems. I was surprised when I looked through some poems to discover that so many of them had something more or less to do with the rock or with water or with both. So I'd like to read poems that in one way or another have something to do with rock and with water, and sometimes an overlapping The voices in the poem are those of Alvin Turner, who's the persona in the first book of mine called Alvin Turner as Farmer, and the persona in a later book, Jacob, the book called Platte Valley Homestead. Titles are difficult, Steve, to remember. So if the reading has nothing else, it has, I think, unity. All of the poems relate to rock and water. The rock and the water, people on, people above, people below, people close beside, people in between. Perhaps one of Ecclesiastes' rivers does somehow begin at our downspouts. And if I mended them as well as I meant to, the cistern should be bursting. I have never seen such rain, the rocks so clean. Because I prefer not to think of mire, of the chores of evening, I'll settle back and contemplate the woman. I see her with a dishpan catching rain. She wants the water straight from heaven, untainted even by my soldered tin. With it she will wash her hair. With it rub her clear face clearer. She has a small nose, active eyes, and a high forehead that, under a wrap of hair shampooed, will smell like rain. Later I'll use a kiss. But with words I reach to touch it now, lightly, like the skimming of cream. My hand to her brow, my fingers tipped in butter, suddenly rich and unpalsied and newly nerved. The rock is an animal underground, wanting an excuse to surface. Surfaced, it lapses into silence, waiting to be moved, patient to be understood. With rope, chain, wire, terrace, I jerry-build a halter for the rock. It is the largest in the yard, a nuisance rising like a single blinder between the house and the driveway. With double lengths of cable, then, I join the rigging to a single tree and give the mare her neck. Breaking her knees, wide Molly snaps the slack and lurches fetlock deep with strain. And splitting an obedient morning with commands, I feel the earth begin begrudgingly to move. There is then no stopping. The boulder, like a blunt-shared plow, eats out a furrow deep enough for tourists. Across the lane, the muscle-rippled mare gut strains her load until beyond the narrow roadway shoulder, I scissor back the reins and shout a halt. 1 second's echo. Then the new-homed rock groans into place. The mare, high-eared, breaks wind, and Martha on the south porch is on her toes, clapping like a congregation, her face appled in sunshine, her stomach firm as a melon with our first child. Over coffee, I am more than horseflesh, and profound. What you cannot destroy, I say, you pissant to a more convenient ground. On a clear night, the larger rocks are reptiles. One, a turtle, is creeping from the east toward the house. Robert saw it first and named it. It is not dangerous, he said, unless you spur it in the flank. On a clear night, backgrounded by the grunting of the hogs, he rides the rock, escaping Andrew. I sit on the high east porch, watching. Martha's hands in the adjoining room are clapping harmony. On a clear night, I see so sharply that the barbs upon our taut and endless fence amaze the eye. They guard like little girdles this evening's flatulence. On a clear night, emptiness is maverick, out of mind. Look, boys, I say, our moon is a Holstein rising from the pasture, her belly full as a tick. Leaned mightily against the rock because it can't relent, says tenderness. Both boys alive and well, both fed, asleep, and Martha strong again, straight as a ray candle. On this warm evening we lie beside a rock, taming locusts. I am corpulent inside new overalls, and pressing my woman against the rock I sense the depth of flesh. And all at once I know, only the rock describes such tenderness. There is always the rock, I say for the first time, and tonight, Martha Anderson, there is also you. There is always the rock wanting an excuse to surface. I have never seen such rain, the rocks so clean. Carried to the side of the road to the top of the hill, the rock released finds a new home on an old, uncertain slope of ground. There is always the rock, that first and last to remember. The rock, at times at dusk, the rabbit, robbing the garden in its own leaden way. And I remember how once I lost time deliberately, reining the team to a stop and raising the rock high to crush it. Underhoof, it had wanted to trip even the full-rumped mares, and I stood there in the furrow with the rock raised above my head, powerless at last to reduce it or even to lose it to sight. Yet I tried, for in those days I had not learned to say, there is always the rock. I threw it into the soft plowed ground and dreamed that it disappeared. How many times then it rose with the rain I cannot say, nor can I boast that ever its usefulness was fully cause for its being. The fences failed to deplete it, and it collared the hogs, but partially. Yet somehow I expected yesterday's blunted share to be the last. That part of me I cannot see, I said, cannot reduce me. I have never seen such rain, the rocks so clean. Perhaps one of Ecclesiastes' rivers does somehow begin at our downspouts. Martha says that all the rivers run to the sea, yet the sea is not full. I have trimmed a new wick, and beside its even flame, Martha reads aloud, her voice clean as mopped linoleum. Pshaw, I say, needling. What has that to do with downspouts? I know that she wants the baby baptized, and I don't really care one way or the other. Our first child took her rebirth with her to the grave, so that I'd personally rather see the water on the corn or not at all, but I'll not be mule-headed. She looks up briefly, not answering, then reads that there is no new thing under the sun. I nod, meaning that I shall arrange the baptism for the earliest Sunday. I wouldn't mention it in town at the feed store, but Martha's voice by lamplight is worth at least one waste of rain. Martha says that all the rivers run to the sea. Across the river, the Pentecosts are gathered for a baptizing. The words to their song suggesting that someone, perhaps even a member of their own congregation, is in the mire, far from the peaceful shore, sinking. You can watch them on their knees, forcing each other's heads down and into something. A layer of water, maybe. A layer of mud. An underworld of sand. Because 12 weeks ago, the river was moved away in blocks of ice to cool the produce in the boxcars of the Burlington. William worked for a time for wages then, one day bringing home a polygon of ice with a carp frozen squarely at the center. God's paperweight, I called it at last, putting an end to our wondering how the fish had managed to trap himself so cleanly. Now the sun comes all the way from heaven to thaw the faces of the Pentecost, and I swear that if the word was something yet to be devised by man, I'd almost rise to sing the music with them. A fellow told me once that without water a duck would be up a creek, and a mighty dry one at that. He said that water is downright necessary for the duck to sit the feathers of its duck's nether eye on. Anna sits on the back porch in a rocker handed down from her mother, nursing the baby. She rocks back and forth, humming something I can't quite put my finger on, though I sit on a milk stool tilted back beside her. The child is so small that it says I exist through the noise of its sucking. Yet I cannot imagine the universe managing without him. How this one arrived on time and in flawless form, every inch of its way measured out as if a soft, deliberate tune, many hearts with the beat of one heart, naturally. Nearby, on the trunk of a high barkless cottonwood, a flicker with ungodly ease is defying gravity. The crescent of red on its busy nape, the only color in all the world it could be. And how do the ducks swim on that little pond just over there, this side of the tool shed. Easy as pie, my boy. Easy as pie. Perhaps one of Ecclesiastes' rivers does somehow begin at our downspouts. That woman. I see her with a dishpan catching rain. She wants the water straight from heaven, untainted even by my soldered tin. The wild ducks floating in the river now diving under, are Carl and William, there to wash the homestead topsoil from their plow-weary skin. Their shouts and laughter in the warm air of evening are like no other sounds on earth I know of. Their bodies from a distance, dipping like the soft white undersides of birds. They say the lark has only 5 notes it can sing, and thus for age on age has sung them, no question asked, no spread of scale, no rash improvisation. And though the ground we work goes always up one row and down another, we have the boundless gift of human sound. Just listen to it, Anna. No 2 syllables ever quite the same. Release in the throats of our boys, in the throats of Carl and of William, washing themselves to be more of themselves downstream. I want to wash myself in the water as if to say, let this be the end of everything sordid and uncalled for. Clinging to this body is the dross of spite and rumor, from upstream the aftermath of blade and of sudden storm. I want to walk unmasked, unshod, into the river, there in the water to wash myself until the skin gives way to something solid, something at last, though burnished, undulant and warm. Anna, come with me. It is night, cold to the bone, and beneath the feet, the sand that today was so tough with light is shifting. I once heard a fellow say that somewhere there's a river that flows in a big wide circle. I once heard a second fellow say that he never heard the first fellow ever to speak a lie, so I believed him. Anna snaps the long, full ears of sweet corn into shorter pan-sized pieces, and from my chair at the kitchen table, I tell her she must be half Pawnee at least, taking always with her, as she does, the center of the universe. Your white man's mouth, she says, dropping the corn into boiling water, is full of talk because your hands are empty. Up from your white man's throne, she says, and mash the potatoes. Through steam rising from pork chop gravy, I watch the boys like blue-eyed beaver gnaw the corn. No matter the size of the acreage, a quarter here, an acre there tacked on, it comes to this. Supper in a bright, warm kitchen. The river in a circle flowing. Clear water over fine, clean sand. Small world, but oh, good God, above, Earth Mother here below. Immense, immense. Amen. The rock and the water, people on, people above, below, people close beside, people in between. Look, boys, I don't honestly know whether Jesus wants either of you for a sunbeam. You'll have to check with your mother. If you must have my opinion, though, I'd guess he has plenty already, like, for instance, that one there on the knife blade, which by midnight just might be sharp enough to saw lard, if you 2 bandits will keep the grindstone wet. You hear me? Now Anna wants to make love, but she wants to do it somewhere different. So she tricks me down into the cave by telling me that a storm is on its way. The threat of water, 2 bodies buried safely underground, the churning of butter. When Anna prophesies a storm, clouds or no clouds, we ready the cellar, pickaxe and lamp, breadbasket and blanket, and I remember how once she lied deliberately to get me with her alone beneath the ground, she said, with nothing but the glassy eyes of beets and peaches, tomatoes and apricots and corn to watch us. Time and again, to see the gathering clouds, the flash of lightning, I cracked the door, until at last, as if a child no longer numb of skull, I joined the sweet, full intention of her guile. How clean the world then, how circumscribed the field we lay on. There and over there the green, the golden harvest. Here and over here headlands furrowed damply with a broom, with space enough for Constance such as we to turn upon. Perhaps one of Ecclesiastes' rivers does somehow begin at our downspouts. Martha says that all the rivers run to the sea, but the sea, because it knows what it knows, is not full. In the sunshine, in the shallows, minnows rub their noses against our bodies as if exploring the hulks of massive ships tossed up from another earth, another time. Oh, the stories I might tell them about the Anna B. How laved year in, year out by the water she went down in, she became at last the essence of all those cargoes priceless beyond degree. Now, indigo her eyes, the tips of her breasts beneath an overhang of willow cochineal. The minnow in its small, snaky world must wait another million years to know what overnight it cannot rise to be. Anna on her back in the shallows, that lovely wreckage of copper and silk in Java, its dark hair moiling suspended on the crest of an inland sea. Aldo Leopold in a Sand County Almanac writes the following. By an international commerce of geese, the waste corn of Illinois is carried through the clouds of the Arctic tundras, there to combine with the waste sunlight of a nightless June to grow goslings for all the lands between. And in this annual barter of food for light and winter warmth for summer solitude, the whole continent receives as net profit a wild poem dropped from the murky skies upon the mud of March. By way of Matthew, Jesus says, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God." And the prodigal son returned, and things worked out, and they slaughtered and ate a fat calf. A bird from the wilds, say, of Tanzania, golden and blue, but otherwise unidentifiable, drops its waste into the damp, mellow loam due south of the workshed and sails on. When my first child's son is old enough to climb, he'll choose, no doubt, that most unique of all Platte Valley limbs, Tanzanian pine. That evening, beside a fire of cottonwood indigenous as womb, I'll tell him all I know of cyclical evolution. How, by the little miracle of chance, the bird had lost its way, how ecologically divine the passing of cone and needle through the eye of a prodigal rectum. "Excuse me," I'll say. "I hear something splashing." I'll finger the hook from the channel's gill and reset the line. Relieving myself in a golden stream into the moon-blue river, I'll return. If there is magic on this planet, wrote Lauren Isley in The Immense Journey, it is contained in water. Its substance reaches everywhere. It touches the past and prepares the future. It moves under the poles and wanders thinly in the heights of air. When at last the clouds gather and the rain begins to fall, I undress to the waist to go outside to a spot between the workshed and the barn, a clearing at the top of a gentle slope where at the center a rock the size of a flywheel rises from the ground as if something alive and on the verge of blooming. Anna is not far behind me, her dark hair flat with rain like beautiful drool against the white teeth of her smile. The nipples on her breasts, chilled by the water, rise and fall. Seed we are and have always been. We stand on the flywheel rock, hugging and laughing, our wet lips touching. With the tips of my fingers wrinkled with rain, I can read each of the vertebrae that, linked by fibrous pads, shape Anna's spine. Seed we are, and will always be. The rock is cleaner now, and higher than ever before, the rain forcing each thing to be itself, to stir, to crack its shell, beneath a full sturgeon moon, to dive to the very bottom of the sea, to breathe again. The rock and the water, people on, people above, below, people close beside, people in between. And not the least of these by far by God are the children. Catherine spends most of the morning washing 7 small stones, which in the afternoon she throws into the river. That evening she wants to know if they are still there, if in the morning we might be able to find them. We wade to each precise spot where she knows, she remembers, she threw them. The water, I tell her, has moved them downstream, and she begins to walk in the direction I am pointing. I follow. She stops from time to time to bend over to bring up a rock, a leaf, a twig, a grain of sand, until at last her fists are thick with 7 small stones. We take them home and dry them off, feed them, give them names, show them to all our friends. When they are fully grown, we carry them back to the ongoing lotus of the river, where, one by one, in mutual joy and pain, we throw them in. In Genesis, the story of Esau and Jacob is told in considerable detail, and one aspect of the story deals with Jacob's wrestling someone or something all night long, until at last Jacob seems to have gained the upper hand. But before he releases whatever it was he seems to have conquered, he says, "I will not let thee go, except thou bless me." William Goyen calls this one of the most richly ambiguous stories in our literature. I choose to believe that Jacob was doing battle with a portion of his past, a portion that deeply disturbed him. Many things have changed for Jacob since the disturbance occurred, but nonetheless the memory of that experience for him will not go away. And probably it never will. But before Jacob releases his grip, he demands that the memory of the disturbance somehow give him something to enrich his life. He seems to be saying that it is not enough to have conquered. The true fulfillment occurs when the thing conquered offers some form of enrichment. I believe that it is significant that this famous all-pro wrestling extravaganza took place on the bank of a river, because not only is the river frequently a dividing line between this place and that, this experience and that, but it likewise is always in process, always moving, always changing. And change inevitably leads to undercurrents, to sinkholes, to disturbances. Here is my effort to wrest something from my memory of my parents taking their first step in the direction of divorce, the recovering for my brother John. Remembering the bulb, bright as any sun above the bed, the length of frayed twine hanging just low enough that sitting I might jerk the room to a brilliant darkness. Remembering the darkness, the sounds it made when the one ear not against the pillow dared to listen. Remembering how it listened, to hear as if from an adjoining room innumerable voices quarreling away from the center of things, from the blue dot that steadies the heart's dark core. I must tell you this, brother, how I yet know the voices as if they had just last night come to me where I lay curled and immovable on the white bed of my unbounded fear. Brother, what does it mean exactly for one person no longer wanting to touch the other? What is the sound the bulb makes when its filament goes, and there is nothing to bring the course we drift on to the white light of reckoning. Brother, our parents separate are becoming old, are becoming more and more filled with the balm of their days, who, in their sweetening stupors, seem unaware that I am here tonight beside the river, wrestling against whatever plague it is, that, having been subdued, I cannot leave to die without its blessing. Thank you.